Hello, welcome back to another Exchange podcast, and I just want to give a shout out because it worked this time. The intro worked on the first time. I don't know, maybe the tech guy is getting better. Hopefully, this is probably my 100th time doing it. Anyway, we're going to continue our look at Mere Christianity. A lot of exciting stuff. Right now, we're going to be looking at this for probably the next few weeks. And then, next few weeks, we're probably going to be looking at this maybe all the way up through Thanksgiving. Maybe not that long. And then we're going to kind of go from there and talk more about fivefold ministry and the necessity of it. I don't want to be like I'm just critical of church and what people are doing and what church leaders are doing. But at the same time, I ask questions. I'm not out of cynicism, but I ask questions. Are we being fully effective?
Oh no, I agree. I'm taking Proverbs 27:17. Iron sharpens iron. If I used this morning in the men's meeting. If you're a sharp sword and you keep hitting a dull piece of wood, eventually you'll become dull.
Yeah.
You need other people that keep you motivated, keep you pointed in the right direction. And if someone in the church isn't doing what they're supposed to do, I mean, they need that motivation. You can do it in love, but I mean, how do you grow? So when you go to any kind of training, let's say for military or police, it's not a cakewalk, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
It's to help you grow and to make you tougher. And in this sense, you want to grow spiritually. It can't be just, we come in, we sing a song, we shake hands, we listen to somebody talk for a few minutes and we go on. It needs to be more in depth, and that's where you start to see the churches fail, when they fail to follow through and really, like you said, the fivefold ministry. You need all those moving parts. You need all the people to work together to make the whole machine more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one of the things that you get with the fivefold, and I'm going to say this here and then I'll leave it here. Ephesians 4:11 tells us what the purpose of the fivefold is, and it is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. What I want to look at today, though, like I said, just continuing with C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, I want to look at chapter 1. Probably going to move a little bit quicker after this week. I kind of landed in chapter 1, the law of human nature, and that's kind of it's really when it's interesting because you see that there was a second assassination attempt on former President Trump's life, and that happened. Was that last Saturday, I think, or last Sunday? It was a week ago tomorrow that the second one occurred. And then there was news that there are 5 that they know of, 5 active teams from Iran who are trained and are trying to assassinate him. This goes much, much bigger than a Republican and Democrat runoff election, or not a runoff, but an election. It goes much deeper than that, much bigger than that. And I want to be very careful because I've said since day one with this podcast that I bear responsibility. I bear full brunt of what is said. So I want to be very careful what is said, that it's not negligent. It's not, irresponsible. In fact, I mean, we've been doing this now for 2 years, and there have been, I know, one episode where I have actually come back and retracted something that I had said the week before because I went on and I found out, hey, I was wrong on that, because it does not take long to undermine your credibility. You can do it quickly. I mean, you being a former police officer know, if you don't know, I mean, how many people you pull over and the first thing they want to do is, you don't have the right to do that. And you better, you better know you have the right to do that, you know? And because I sent you a text the other day because the question had come up and we were talking about rights. The question had come up, can a police officer force a driver to keep the window down at a routine traffic stop? And of course, the answer that you said, which was no. And another friend of mine who's also in law enforcement agreed with that. So, I mean, that's what I'm just trying to say, you know, the credibility part of it. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say there is no specific law that would prohibit you from not lowering the window. Mm-hmm. During a traffic stop, you are obligated to interact. I mean, you can't hand documents like registration, insurance, or driver's license through a closed window. However, there's nothing in the law that says that it has to remain down. But like we talked about, there are some other circumstances. Your window tint's so dark it can't be seen through. The lighting conditions, furtive movements, for those of you that are listening that don't know what that is, they're moving around, reaching under the seat or in the console, things that could be construed as either trying to hide evidence or possibly go for a weapon. You can order someone to roll the windows down. Now, the flip side of that is you're obligated to follow a lawful order given by a police officer. So there's a little kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, kind of the gray area. Yeah. The best advice I could give, though, would be to comply. Mm-hmm. It's better to fight in court than on the roadside.
Which you're going to lose.
Yes. And you see a lot of people who think they know the law and they don't. And it inevitably comes back to haunt them.
Yeah.
Now, don't do anything overtly illegal. Like if they order you to do something completely absurd, then by all means, don't comply.
Yeah.
You'll have a great lawsuit on your hands. But if it's something as simple as that, given the appropriate circumstance, that could be a request that the officer makes.
Well, a friend of mine who's a state trooper, he told me one time, he said, first thing to do if they're a state trooper is look to see if the shoes are nice and polished. If they are, that means they're a friend of the judge. They're sitting behind a desk somewhere, and you will lose if you try to take that to court. Anyway, no, we're talking about the law of human nature out of C.S. Lewis, and I kind of wanted to segue into that because at the very first part of the chapter, he says everyone has heard people quarreling. Sometimes it sounds funny, and sometimes it sounds merely unpleasant. But however it sounds, I believe we can learn something very important from listening to the kind of things they say. They say things like this: how do you like it if someone sorry, let me back that up. How do you like it if anyone did the same to you? That's my seat. I was there first. Leave him alone. He isn't doing you any harm. Why should you shove in first? Give me a bit of your orange. I gave you a bit of mine. Come on, you promised. People say things like that every day, educated people as well as uneducated, children as well as grown-ups. Now, one of the things that, again, like I said, I tell you, I want to be responsible about what we say and do. There's enough just horrible stuff going on that it's always good to have people that will come with some kind of positive, hey, this is something we can latch on to. This is something that we can look at and, Winston Churchill, and I'm not putting myself in the category of any of these guys, but, they would always come with something, and it's not that you're trying to bury your head in the sand and act like that nothing's going on. That isn't the case. But you get inundated day in and day out with bad news. Our media loves bad news.
It sells.
Yes. And just like we're talking about there, I mean, one of the first things that will always hit the news is when you've got somebody who thinks they know the law better than the law enforcement officer, which they may. But if, like you said, it goes into a fight in the street, that person's not going to come out the winner.
No, you may eventually through a drawn out court case, but in the moment, is it really worth the risk to you and everyone else involved?
Yeah, and that's, see, they're going on with what he with this first page. He says, now what interests me about all these remarks is that the man who makes them is not merely saying that the other man's behavior does not happen to please him. He is appealing to some kind of standard of behavior which he expects the other man to know about, and the other man very seldom replies, away with your standard. Nearly always he tries to make out that what he has been doing does not really go against the standard, or that if it does, there is some special excuse. He pretends there is some special reason in the particular case why the person who took the seat first should not keep it, or the things were quite different when he was given the bit of orange, or something has turned up which lets him off keeping his promise. It looks, in fact, very much as if both parties had in mind some kind of law or rule of fair play or decent behavior or morality or whatever you like to call it, about which they really agreed. So that goes along with where we are right now, the relevant morality, if you will. You know, it's only right or wrong if I see it right or wrong. But at the end of the day, that is not, even human nature lets us know that there is a right and wrong.
Well, I look at shared beliefs amongst different cultures on different continents. Mm-hmm. It is universally held that murder is wrong. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you go to any other part of the world. There is some standard on taking another person's life. Theft is generally regarded, regardless of where you go in the world, as being wrong. You don't take what doesn't belong to you. I mean, there's a multitude of things that seem constant throughout humanity, no matter how different the cultures are, whether they're Asian, African, European, it doesn't matter. They all have some of the same standards. Yeah. So the question in my mind is, well, where did those standards come from?
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I think we know the answer.
Yeah.
But
well, you're right. And there was a poll that was taken just earlier this week, and it's that 28% of the Democrat voters, the left-leaning voters, believe that we would be better off if Trump were dead. That's a large percentage. Now, I bring that up not to be political. I bring that up because what has gotten America to the point that we believe that we are okay with seeing a politician killed just because we disagree with them?
Yeah, well, it says a lot about the degradation of our moral fabric.
Yeah.
Where you have almost a third, but I mean, I guess it's closer to a quarter, but still, that's a significant number of people that think that murder is okay. It's disheartening, but like John Wilkes Booth and all these other assassins at the time believed they were doing the right thing. The question I would posit is, are you on the right side of history? I don't think that, I would hope that America would never reach the point where removal of a political person would be, by that means, you vote them out, not have to kill them.
Well, there's an interesting theory, and of course the theory basically follows out when you look at things through a historical viewpoint. The presidents that have been assassinated, I think Zachary Taylor, Abraham Lincoln, I believe Garfield was. I think he was. Kennedy, Roosevelt there was an attempt on his life.
Attempt on Reagan.
Attempt on Trump. 2 of them. And the point being is that these were all America First presidents. And so, the thing is that you're dealing with people that want to define what human law and what the law of nature says based upon, not based upon the higher end of human law, but very much on the lower end of human law.
Exactly. The reason they're targeted is because they hit some of these corporations and people with ill intentions in the pocketbook. They're not for these global wars. They're not for outsourcing cheap labor. They're more concerned with creating innovation and growth at home, and not looking at the globalist picture. And I think that that hurts the military industrial complex and a lot of these other rich entities that don't want that to happen. Kennedy didn't want us to be involved in Vietnam. He really wanted to de-escalate that, and the war machine wanted to move forward. Trump, has vowed once he gets in to end the war in Ukraine. There are many rich, powerful people who don't want that to happen.
Right.
And like I said, I have no doubts that Ukraine is how a lot of rich people are laundering their money, which is why you have Americans tied up in the utilities, or like gas and electric in Ukraine. Like, we have no business being involved in sitting on the board of companies that are halfway across the world. I think that there's a lot of corruption there, and by cutting that off, it would really cut into certain people's pocketbooks, which is why they're so staunch against anyone who questions what we're doing in certain regions in the world.
Yeah, and that is kind of what he's talking about here because he says quarreling means trying to show that other man is in the wrong, and there would be no sense in trying to do that unless you and he had some sort of agreement as to what right and wrong are. Just as there would be no sense in saying that a footballer had committed a foul unless there was some agreement about the rules of football, which he goes on talking about later on in the chapter. He goes on to talk about how that the rules were set down. That's the only reason why we knew that the Nazis were bad in World War II, and even in World War I with the aggression, because that there was an agreement as to, otherwise, why wouldn't we just say that what they were doing in the Holocaust was okay? So there has to be some sort of disagreement. And this is what the globalist elites quickly found out after both world wars, is that you cannot bring certain countries up to the standards of the countries like England, the more what's the word I'm looking for, progressed nations, for lack of words. So you have to bring countries like ours down, and that's why that we're getting this argument now that human life is not meaningful. We are getting these arguments that marriage, or that families are not important. Having children is not important, and all this is very important because it's important to society for society to exist. And Lewis does a great job in describing that. Like I said, when he did this originally, he did it as a radio broadcast. And I think it's something that I would advise anybody, go get the book and read it. Mere Christianity is the name of it. You will see so much of what's going on today, Because first off, what he was doing is he was dealing with what was going on in Europe and England specifically during his lifetime. And I believe it is in Abolition of Man that he says that eventually that train of thought, that line of thought would, meaning the thought that, because in Abolition of Man, he writes and he says that we're creating men without chests. And it's talking about ripping away the masculinity. And really, it's talking about ripping away the family unit, because once you've ripped away the family structure, a society collapses and it's very easy to control.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at the detriment of not having children. China, for instance, with their one-child policy, is now posed for a population collapse. They have far more people who are progressed in age than they do young people to replace them. If you want to cripple a country, convince them not to have kids, because when you're gone, and think about it this way. Okay, you're married and you have 2 children. You've just essentially replaced yourselves. There's no growth. By doing these things, attacking the nuclear family, attacking your, I wouldn't go so far as to say, well, no, it is. I'm going to make a stand there. I think it's your duty to have children and to raise them to be appropriate adults who can better the world. By crippling that, I mean, you're seeing the death of a country. Once you eliminate the family, the children will typically fall into despair and often will find themselves at odds with the law. It just seems to crumble from there. But then by simply not having children, you'll see the population decline and ultimately collapse.
Yeah, and that he goes on to say that he goes on really to kind of talk about that. He's talking about how that when people say the law of nature, the first thing that pops into most people's mind is such things as gravity and things like that. Nobody would deny that. You throw somebody out of a plane and they're suspended in midair, they're going to obey the law of gravity. But there are certain things, and he says that that people always assumed you just knew. Excuse me. And the writer of Romans actually talks about this. He says that we would be judged according to the law written on our heart, or to the rule, what we understand. The Bible says that God reveals himself through nature. And there are certain things that honestly you can take somebody, put 2 or 3 people on an island. If they got a way to sustain themselves from birth all the way up to the adulthood, naturally they're going to learn that there are things that you don't do. For instance, killing, murder. You just know you don't do it. I mean, you can take the most simple society, in the darkest regions of any jungle, and they're going to know that there's certain things you don't do. That's why that I come to the question: how did we in America exactly get to the point where we feel it's okay that we would be better off with a presidential candidate dead?
Well,
that goes against human nature.
And I would posit that that's why the abortion issue has become so large, because there is a portion of the population that sees it as murder, and there is a growing portion that sees it as a right, a fundamental human right. The devaluing of human life has been a growing trend, and that's one of the places where the church really needs to step in.
Yeah.
The sanctity of life, life is precious.
Yeah.
And we treat it as if it's something expendable. And like I said, I think that's why you see that is one of the topics at the forefront. I'd actually sent you a video of 25 college students debating Charlie Kirk, and that's one of the issues they bring up. And it's really disheartening to see how a lot of young people have been deceived into thinking that that's morally okay.
Yeah. Well, they are. It has been put into their belief system since day one. I mean, this is what the communists found out very early on. They found out that if you start to make once you take away people's belief in God, in a higher power, in that there is something beyond this life, that what happens is human life then begins to be meaningless. And I've heard kids, I mean young kids, I'm talking 4th, 5th, 6th grade kids who are at they are at the germane, like the very beginning. I mean, should I even say the beginning of their life? I mean, they are, but and yet they will ask questions that I never thought of at that age. And I never had friends who thought of that. I'm sure there were kids who did, but they're like, well, what is this life even worth? Why do I want to continue living? I mean, I'm going, these are questions that typically you don't ask until you're an adult, not at that age.
I think one of the big issues there is, you now have a growing movement of people saying, don't shelter your kids.
Yeah.
Your kids need to understand there are certain realities, but kids these days are thrust into so much. And, by allowing your children access to the internet, I mean, they have so much at their fingertips that is not appropriate for their age.
Right. And
they're being, in many ways, forced to grow up far beyond what I think is acceptable, or like we all understand, and it's fairly universally accepted that human beings develop in a linear fashion. Okay, you don't just overnight, you're not grown up, but we're trying to thrust them into positions where they shouldn't be exposed. That's part of the reason we chose to homeschool this year, is to try to dial that back. They're being exposed to far too much, far too young, and far too many parents are okay with that. They allow the electronics to raise their children.
Yeah, and that is very much I heard a kid the other day talk about how that COVID had changed the way that they were doing education, and it's not been for the good, because a lot of kids, they want to do everything virtual. Well, the reason they want to do it virtual is because the kid has more control on whether or not they do or don't learn. And parents have got to start to step in more and know what their kids are learning. Don't just leave it up to the schools, because don't just leave it up to even your college professors. Even at that age, find out what your kids are learning, because that's really what he's talking about here. He says, but taking the race as a whole, they thought that the human idea of decent behavior was obvious to everyone. And I believe they were right. If they were not, then all the things we said about the war were nonsense. Of course, he's talking about World War II. And when he says race, he's obviously talking about the human race. And he says, I know that some people say the idea of a law of nature or decent behavior known to all men is unsound, because different civilizations and different ages have had quite different moralities. But this is not true. We were just talking about this a little earlier. He says there have been differences between their moralities, but these have never amounted to anything. Like a total difference, if anyone will take the trouble to compare the moral teachings of, say, the ancient Egyptians, Babylonians, Hindus, Chinese, Greeks, and Romans, what really strike him will be how very like they are to each other and to our own. Some of the evidence for this I have put together in an appendix of another book called The Abolition of Man, but for our present purpose, I need only to ask the reader to think what a totally different morality would mean. Think of a country where people were admired for running away in battle, or where a man felt proud of double-crossing all the people who had been kindest to him. You might just as well try to imagine a country where 2 and 2 made 5. Now, we're telling kids that.
Yeah.
If you think 2 and 2 make 5, then go for it. You believe that, that's fine. You can believe that.
Which shows the actual driving force behind it is something that's not human. It's far more sinister than that. What you're seeing in the world is the spiritual battle that's going on. Humans do so many things that are not in their self-interest. And the only reason I could posit for that would be the forces that are acting upon them that are outside of their control.
Yeah.
Like if you go from a biblical perspective, a third of all the angels fell with Satan. They're still roaming the earth. Them and their minions are still acting on people, which is why you see humans do things that are so grossly against our best interest, and like this push towards nuclear war. There's been a growing push, like we're edging towards, and there's people that think it's okay.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I heard it during the war in Iraq. Just turn it into a bed of glass.
Mm-hmm.
Just kill them all.
And you can't, because that goes against human nature. Because that's why, Jesus said, treat your enemies as yourself. Or love your enemies as yourself. And, people want to talk about Christianity, and there's some people who want to say Christianity is ancient, Christianity is outdated, but Christianity is what has changed society. And this is what Lewis is talking about with Mere Christianity, how much it has changed society. He says in the prelogue, he said, if we just start applying the name Christian to everything, then eventually it loses its meaning. And, one of the things that Christianity actually downplayed, or not downplayed, it undermined it and chipped away at the foundation, was slavery. And you can just go to the book of Philemon, and it's just one chapter. It's 25 verses long. It's not long to read at all. They're short verses. And he talks about, he's writing to Philemon, who's a brother. He's a Christian. And Philemon owns slaves. And Paul is in prison. And Onesimus goes to him. And he's actually running away. And Paul urges him, says, go back. He says, go back. And then he greets Philemon. He talks... excuse me. He praises Philemon really for all the goodness that Philemon has done. And then in verse 8, it starts the plea for Onesimus from Paul. He says, therefore, although in Christ I could be bold in order you to do what you ought to do, yet I prefer to appeal to you on the basis of love. It is this none other than Paul, an old man, and now also a prisoner of Christ Jesus, that I appeal to you for my son Onesimus, who became my son while I was in chains. Formerly, he was useless to you, but now he has become useful both to you and to me. I'm sending him, who is my very heart, back to you. I would have liked to keep him with me so that he could take your place in helping me while I'm in chains for the gospel, but I did not want to do anything without your consent, so that any favor you do would not seem forced, but would be voluntary. Perhaps the reason he was separated from you for a little while was that you might have him back forever, no longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. So what he does there is he takes the very institution and he says, look, Onesimus is as much of a brother as you and I are. You don't treat, and go back to the Old Testament, Jews could not have other Jews as slaves. It was against the law. And so when he says this, he says, you have to understand you cannot have a slave who is a Christian. So as Christianity began to spread, a lot of people don't, the Jewish people, when Christ came to the earth, they thought that what he was going to do was he was going to, he would create this army. That's why they wanted Barabbas, because they knew Barabbas was a zealot. They knew, oh, Barabbas, man, he'll build an army and we'll fight the Romans. And when he's standing before Pilate and they're like, who do I release? They said Barabbas. Why? Because Barabbas they knew was going to give them what they wanted. Jesus wasn't, but he was, because Jesus was saying, yeah, we're going to overcome, just like Daniel saw that stone that came through and crushed all the kingdoms of the world. But it's not going to be the way you think it's going to be. It's not going to be militarily. He said, my kingdom is not of this world. He said, it's in the hearts of men. And Lewis does such a great job in describing what the kingdom that is in the hearts of men really mean. And first off, it is those natural laws that God has placed in human society and in the world.
Yeah, well, so I know we talked about it before, but the laws of nature, like you discussed, gravity, and some of the other forces, what people don't realize is those had to be in place and exist prior to creation, which means that the only way they could have gotten there was a creator. Because if gravity changed, we'd be floating one second and falling the next. There are certain things in the universe that are constant, and they all point towards a creator. The fact that we have behaviors that are spread across all the different cultures, that we define as good or bad, that are universal, once again points towards a creator.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, everything points to that there is, as you said, intelligent design. And I didn't really get to see the thing with Charlie Kirk. Kind of go into that a little bit. What was...
Well, so he has 25 college students who are just chomping at the bit to debate him. Uh-huh. And they're sitting around in a circle. And he's sitting at a table, and there's a timer, and then, there's a chair on the other side. And essentially, when, they prompt it, the first person, actually several people run out and they sit down, but he'll have a topic. One of the topics was abortion is murder. Uh-huh. And he tries to debate them, but you can really see what the college institutions are doing to the minds of these people.
Yeah.
Because they debate a whole slew of topics, but Christianity does come up, moral standards, and it's become popular now with a lot of college students to accept this idea of moral relativism, or
which is kind of what we're talking about here today.
Yeah, or the fact that it's just a social construct. Uh-huh. And Charlie Kirk does a great job of breaking that down and turning it back on them.
He's probably one of the best thinkers of our time right now.
Well, and one of his
maybe
topics,
Christian philosophers, I guess, might be a fair.
One of the topics was college was a scam. Yeah. And he turned it on him. He said, okay, have you taken any classes that you didn't think were necessary or didn't have any direct value to your major? And they're like, yeah.
Every one of them will tell you this.
And he was like, yeah. And he was like, okay, so how they're forcing you to spend money to do something that's not in your best interest. Anyway, he couldn't quite seem to get the ball rolling or get them thinking. But the fact that he's so well versed in so many different topics and he didn't attend college is really, a testament to him.
Well, I am not anti-education. I have one. I'm glad that I've got one. But I can also tell you that, and you and I, our degrees are the same thing. So I'm not against going to college. However, I had that very conversation. I didn't get to watch that with Charlie Kirk. You sent it to me. I didn't get to see it. But I had that conversation with a coworker just yesterday about how many classes you take that is completely, it's irrelevant to what you're studying. You should not have to go if you're going to be. Every time someone asks, what was your major, and I tell them, well, it was music, and then and history education. The next thing out of their mind is if it gets brought up that I had to take biology or some kind of high math, and they're like, why did you have to take that for your degree? Because somebody had to get paid, and they had to throw a student loan debt off on me, which, by the way, student loan is indentured servanthood.
Yeah, well, so something else they brought up was the fact that you had to take gender studies to be a lawyer.
Yeah, why?
Yes. And then they tried to spin it, well, it's part of the humanities or, social studies and this and that. The point is, like you said, the college is looking to make money, and they are looking for the government to subsidize their income.
Yeah.
And the only way they can do that is if they're forcing you, like when I got my degree, I think I had to take, I believe it was 126 hours. And so a lot of that was mostly irrelevant to what I was studying.
Yeah.
But you're forced to. If you want the degree, you have to take all these other subjects. But, he brought up the point that an overwhelming majority of those students with those degrees would go out and would not be able to find jobs, certainly not jobs that pay what they were hoping to get paid.
Yeah, because there's too many people in those fields.
And so he said, you come out of college hoping that you'll make $80,000 to $100,000 a year. And he said, what if I told you you could do an apprenticeship with a plumber and an electrician and come out and be making that much money?
Yeah.
People don't want that.
Well, right.
They've given into the illusion that is the only way, and you can only be educated if you go to college.
So I just heard in a county away from us, that last year they had, excuse me, what'd they say? I think it was something like 291 graduates. Out of that 291 graduates, I think it was 136 that went to college. Okay, whatever that percentage is, I don't do math that quick off the top of my head. That's less than 1%, right? Or no, that's a little more than 1%, right? Because that's far more than 1%. But anyway, I mean, there's more that. I mean, what it's saying is that a lot of those kids. What they did is they went straight, they woke up, so let's say they graduated on Sunday, Monday morning, they had a job. Okay. Now, even the schools are starting to encourage kids, or not so much encourage, but they are starting to instruct kids. There are apprenticeships that you can go to, which I think are great. I remember Mike Rowe back years ago, back in the early 2000s, he was talking, and he said, if we don't start bringing back certain things like shop in schools, he said in the next 15 years, and this is like 20 years ago, he said in the next 15 years, we're not going to have skill labor jobs that we're going to need just for everyday industry.
Yeah.
And try to go get your car fixed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, Erica's car was having issues with the drivetrain or transmission, and all the places I called, they were talking about how long of a wait. One guy I called, and he was like, I can't get to it like in the foreseeable future. And the earliest one I got was like 3 weeks out,
Mm-hmm.
because there's simply not enough people who are competent who can actually do it. You're seeing those skilled labor pools dry up because everyone's under the illusion that they need a piece of paper to be intelligent and to be successful. It's simply not true. Some of the smartest people I've ever met never went to college.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, college is necessary for some professions, and I really enjoyed college. I did. However, I really have not utilized my degree. All the career paths I chose after college didn't rely on that college degree. And I think that's the case with a majority of people who are going now, especially if you're getting a degree in something like social science or, you're not going to find, some people will, but an overwhelming majority will find themselves doing something completely different.
So out of the 290 students who graduated last year, 40% went to college. So that's whatever that breaks down to. I can't come up with that without a calculator. I'll just be honest with you. I'm not a math person. But anyway, I'm saying that because what's happening is people are starting to wake up that, hey, we've been lied to. This is not working. And I don't think it's too little too late. I think some of it is starting to pay off. I think some of these guys like Charlie Kirk and them, and like I said, he's one of the greatest thinkers of our day right now. Philosophers, I should say. I call him a philosopher. He might not be, but I think, in a lot of ways, I think he is. But, something that going on, Lewis says here, and kind of closing out the day, but he says, men have differed as regards what people you ought to be. Men have differed as regards what people you ought to be unselfish to, whether it was only your own family or your fellow countrymen or everyone. But they have always agreed that you ought to not put yourself first. Selfishness has never been admired. Men have differed as to whether you should have one wife or four, but they have always agreed that you must not simply have any woman you like. In 1 Corinthians chapter 5, we read that about, David killing Uriah. And David had several wives, and that is not what got David in trouble. What got David in trouble was he took another man's wife and had the man murdered. Now, understand, I am not saying polygamy is okay. I am not saying that. No, it is one man for one wife. My point about this is what Lewis is saying there. The difference has always been, God did not take the ability for David he did not tell David that the sword would never depart from his house because he had multiple wives, even though he wasn't supposed to. Because even in the Old Testament, God said no. But that's not what got David in trouble. What got David in trouble was taking another man's wife, coveting. And we're seeing that start, and that is something else that has come up through the educational system, and we call it socialism and communism. Marx, when France was going through their revolution, Thomas Paine wanted to go fight over there, or he wanted to be some kind of influence over there and have American troops committed to fighting. Imagine that. That kind of is the order of the day too. Somebody wants to be an influence and commit your sons to the fight. But he wanted to go over there and have something to do with it. And Washington said, no, this is not our revolution. And what he meant was, yes, the French had helped us, but the revolution that the French were fighting, those revolutionaries were not ours, in that they didn't believe that France was founded, was founded to bring glory to God. They did not believe in the sanctity of life. They did not believe in the freedom of religion. And he was saying that the revolution we fought is not that revolution. And so Thomas Paine went over there and almost got himself killed. What you find throughout history is it was those revolutionaries, the French revolutionaries, that inspired Karl Marx, that brought about the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. 70 years later, give or take.
Yeah, well, and how many millions of people paid the ultimate price for all of that?
Russia's about 120 years later. Well, and that's the thing. Like I said, guys, math is not my thing. But I think it was about 100 something years. But yes, how many people paid the price for that? And even still to this day, France has never really rebounded from that.
No.
And you look at where Russia is even still today. Russia is, communism took its toll on Russia. Why? Because you cannot, in the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments told us that we were not to covet. You cannot covet and think that you are entitled to something someone else has. I'm working on as many people know, I go out and I minister at different churches and do different things, but I'm working on something now out of Acts where Simon Peter, he's working, God's working miracles through him, and Simon the sorcerer comes up to him and wants to pay for it. And Peter says, "May you perish and take your money with you, for you are found in the gall of all bitterness." It's amazing what bitterness will do to people. And that is what we find with people. They see something that someone else has, and instead of trying to figure out how to get it for themselves, or just maybe even saying, you know what, I'm not meant to have that, they get bitter, they get jealous, and then they start, even by force, trying to take it.
Yeah, which is why you have to remember that this is the land of equal opportunity, not equal outcome.
Yes.
One of the main reasons that communism will never flourish, despite what anyone thinks, is the fact that there is no recognition of excellence.
Yeah.
You write a book, it's a New York Times bestseller, which that doesn't mean much anymore, but
No.
But let's say you write something that's really excellent. It's property of the state. Everyone wrote it. You're all required to produce X amount of grain. Like you go above and beyond because you're a great farmer. Well, there's no recognition. You're not allowed to keep anything that you make in excess.
Yeah.
And what you see and what you saw there in Russia was those at the top, they got wealthier, they got fatter while everyone else starved or was killed.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's the exact same thing that they killed all of the... I was actually having a conversation with my dad on the way down here, and we were talking about Cuba. Cuba was actually, before communism took over, Cuba was relatively a flourishing country. But like always, the communists make a lie, and the rich have, and you got the bourgeois and the serfs, and then you got the haves and the have-nots, and so on and so forth. And that's what they did. I mean, they just lied to the people about Batista until they overthrew him, and now you go. I mean, a missionary who I'm friends with, he's a missionary to Cuba. And he said, right now things are so bad that the people are eating plant roots down there. There were people in Russia, because the food was so bad, that they would start to develop certain health issues through BMs or whatever. And it would end up killing them. This is why that you do not allow yourself to feel entitled to someone else's hard work.
No. If you want something, you have to work for it. There is no reward for doing nothing.
Yeah.
You've been lied to if you believe any different. If you want something, by all means, it's likely obtainable, but it's going to take you buckling down and digging in.
Yeah.
You can't just simply, and I think that's, one of the big issues is we're a culture of instant gratification.
Yeah.
If I can't have it now, I'm going to throw my fit.
Yeah.
Some things, like the old adage, good things come to those who wait.
Yeah.
You have to work, and you have to have goals. And you have to keep working towards them. You can't just, it's why theft is so big, because nobody wants to actually work. They just want to take someone else's. But it's totally the wrong response.
Yeah.
And, I love the saying that my aunt taught me, if you steal a nickel, God will get you for a dime.
Mm-hmm.
It may not happen right this second, but eventually you'll
It'll
get
catch
your
up.
you'll get your comeuppance.
It will. And, speaking of which, one thing I'm grateful for is we've not had George Soros show up with that weed eater at the window of the last couple of weeks. So we might have got that taken care of. Security might have got him out of here. That's been a good thing. And I can tell you, it is George Soros. And anyway, it has been a good exchange. And we're gonna keep looking into Mere Christianity, try to make this as understandable as possible. Feel free, always join in the exchange. Send your questions. I see your questions when you send them. I see your comments when you see them. Michael can see them. We will respond to them, even live. We will respond to them. We want to hear back from you. Like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about us. Also, if you want to support us with financial, we do different things with it. We support different ministries, but we also are trying to, at the end of the day, we're trying to, there's some things that we're trying to go with on this podcast, upgrade and do some things with it. But anyway, you can go to Convergent City Church and go to the giving menu, press down. You'll see the Exchange podcast. Feel free to give to that. And I just want to say thank you again for joining us. Michael, what do you got?
I appreciate all of our listeners as well. I've said this before, but please give us some feedback. If there's a direction you'd like us to go, you got a question, you got a topic you think would be good for us to discuss, we can't do it without you. I really appreciate the support we've received, and I appreciate people listening. As you walk through the world and you look and everything seems like doom and gloom, open your Bible, turn the TV off, get out of the social media, meet with some like-minded people who will prop you up. Your circle is important. Those that you keep around you are important, and focus on those relationships, not on a screen. Mm-hmm. And with that, I'll bid you a good day.
Uh-oh, he showed up. He has showed up. He's here.
Here we go.
He's... See, he thinks he's going to do it. Nope, we're going to kick him out. That was, anyway, thank you for being here. It has been a good podcast. Come back next week. Like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about us, and we will see you then. Be blessed. Go with God.